welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's actually a first of a series of can resilience HR can impact resilience, or can resilience can impact HR, or how HR can benefit of resilience in a VUCAH world. And we have a panel today of my colleagues and friends. And just for disclosure, all of us are part of the Mental Wellness Society. So thank you very much. I will ask you, all the people who are attending, to indicate in the chat room where are you located, city, country. That will help us tremendously. On what type of activity you do. That will be wonderful if you can. So let's start with this video.
What is resilience? In short, resilience is the ability to cope when something goes wrong. From our ancestors' instinct to survive to modern-day stresses and strains. Our resilience has helped us to bounce back when things haven't gone to plan. But what does resilience look like? People who are more resilient are likely to be better at solving problems, ask for help when they need it, and have a can-do attitude. People who are less resilient are likely to struggle under pressure, experience symptoms of anxiety and depression, and often feel deflated and hopeless when things go wrong. So what can you do to boost your resilience? 1. Break the problem down. It will be much easier to manage in smaller pieces. 2. Focus on the positives. It will help you feel more optimistic about finding a solution. 3. Build and use your support network. Whether it's friends, family, or colleagues, it's good to have someone in your corner. 4. Look after yourself. It'll help you refocus, making you feel more confident and in control. 5. Know your limits. If we take on too much, we can feel overwhelmed and unable to cope. Resilience is a skill that you can develop, and it takes practice. Over time, you'll become better and better at resolving problems when they arise. Try these 5 tips to boost your bounce-back ability.
So you have your spiral, down spiral. Start with a spirit in action. Everything is great in the organization. It's a sustainable world-class business, or at the level of individual, it's meaning, flow, joy, compassion. Okay, but at the bottom of the spiral, which can go quick, the people are depressed, there is organizational death, and there is a lot of interest. Again, as I indicated before, don't pay too much attention to the depth and the breadth of the slides, because you will receive a copy of the PowerPoint, so you can look at it at your leisure. But we will only point to you the main element in those slides. So I'm Abraham Gerard Meyer. I have a PhD in psychology and a PhD in physiology, and I've been, I would say, all my professional life involved in human factors. And I have been working in human factors with man in the loop, meaning making sure that the man, the human, is comfortable. Not the technology oblige the mind to change, but the technology adapt to man. But the question is, how can you help to contribute to make the world better? That has been my whole career. I want to thank today also our sponsor, co-sponsor, the Reswell and Wellbeing Resilience Foundation. And the foundation is helping us. It's a not-for-profit organization, and it's helping us to finance events like today, or research, or education. Reswell is a non-for-profit organization. We will speak a little bit later also, but it's a network of researchers. And the Mental Wellness Society is a not-for-profit organization as well. So GIRA is a global institute for resilience advancement, and we believe that together we adapt faster. So you can go later to the website, but the idea is to look at us as basically an accelerator of startup. And when we say startup of innovation, technology, ideas, concept on validation of research. That's what we do. So we have 5 departments, 5 main activity, which are science, research, technology, education, training, internet, communication, well-being, and happiness. So our vision is scientific discovery, transform lives. Our mission, advancing scientific frontiers, innovation drive resilience, igniting technological innovation. Education paves the path of resilience and powering through education. Digital network foster unity, elevating well-being and happiness. Well-being and happiness flourish. We are championing global collaboration, and global cooperation shapes progress by cultivating transformative leaders. But we are not alone. We have an organization, I would say a sister organization, which is called the Mental Wellness Society. Today, we started the Mental Wellness Society day 1 of COVID, so a few years ago only, with a little group of us. And now we have over 250,000 members with 18,500 experts. They are the ones who are more engaged, involved, 24/7 in 74 countries, because we're all over the world. We started with helping in COVID to reduce burnout and the idealization of suicide for medical profession and first responders. Then we continue with war in Ukraine. And with the war in Ukraine, we help psychologists because we wanted them to be stronger in order to help the population. And now we are active in Israel because, as you know, there is a VUCAH on steroid attacking us in Israel. So that's what we do. So we have this activity. We have 5 groups: research, validation, health and wellness, agent of change, meaning corporation, business, education, parenting, psychologist, life coach, social worker, all type of profession which have to do with mental health. So basically, 5 groups on who will be addressing to you today as part of those 5 groups. So VUCAH, corporate world is constantly evolving with VUCAH, which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, hyperconnectivity. But those threats present something very, very serious, which goes by stress, burnout, and even suicide. So there are things that it really can hurt your productivity. So resilience basically is not to feel like a victim. And many times in corporation, employees feel like a victim. They feel abused. So the priority is when calamity occurs is to survive. And how do you do that? You focus, for example, in Israel, we use that tool, focus of what you will do after the war. That projects you after the war. That projects you to a positive outcome. Helping others is very important. That's what we all do in the Mental Wellness Society. Social interaction. You choose what you let enter in your mind, soul, and heart. That's important. You have a choice. Be a solution-oriented person focusing on your destination. Destination is really what will take everybody out of any type of problem, looking at a positive destination. In my regard, it all started at Carnegie Mellon, Driver Training Safety Institute. I received a congressional apportionment in T21. It's a grant which was administered by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. It was a budget of $18 million for 3 years, where we were only studying split-second optimal decision-making under stress and duress to make the driver safer. How do you make safer? We did not reduce accidents, we prevent accidents, and it's a different paradigm. So the discovery, 85% of the population was non-diagnosed ADHD. We analyzed 1,400 professionals. And what we found is that the safety is achieved through avoiding flight, fight, freeze by focusing on non-intuitive and teaching of looking at a positive outcome. Change and resilience can be learned because you end up where you look. Accident teach accident. Success teaches success. So positive destination is the most potent backward design asset. We work starting by the end. What do you want to achieve? Otherwise, you enter in panic and tunnel vision effect. Impulsivity and attention are two major causes of danger. And polymodal intervention ensure long-term durable change achieved through combining mind and body awareness. You see, on that slide, you see that to hear a word is a part of the brain. To think of a word is another part. To speak about that word is another part. And to see that word is another part. That explains why multimodal is so powerful to help people. Tunnel vision is a survival mechanism. It basically, the blood pressure goes up, the heartbeat goes up, adrenaline goes up, and the hormone kick in, and your eyelid close, horizontally, longitudinally. So when you are in tunnel vision effect, I'm sorry, you only see that area. The rest is closed. So meaning your visual field of perception is limited, and your cognitive field of visual is even smaller. But if we remove that TV, look at all what you see. And that's what we do with what we do. And you need to know that TV is a precursor of PTSD. So we balance the stress response, and we work on the vagus nerve, and we help to control impulse control and to keep calm, to stay calm. So we are negatively wired, but there is a solution. So the solution is you end up where you look. And also, green door, red door, we'll see that in a minute, and to let go the problem. And you see the monkey have his hand, he's prisoner, because he have a banana in the hand and he does not let go. So what we ask to everybody is, what is your banana? Because at the moment you let it go, you are free. So instead of asking yourself, why does this always happen to me? Ask yourself what makes you always follow the same path. Because humans are creators of habits. And what we propose you is purposely a new problem, not to do as before. So green door, red door is very simple. Life is binary. If you see a red door, which is a problem, look and you will see the green door. And the green door takes you to another green door, another one, and you end up to your destination. But the key is to keep your internal locus of control, to be in control of what you choose. Unfortunately, when there is something like COVID or VUCAH, your internal locus of control slides down to become an external locus of control. And that's what we see every day worldwide with the post-COVID PTSD. Because the people are not used to decide anymore and to choose. They don't know what to do. And that's part of the calamity people have in VUCAH. So VUCAH stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, hyperconnectivity. But in fact, they are present in our world every day. And what you want to do is to give primacy of your reasoning rather than your emotion. Volatility have a psychological effect, a physiological effect. Uncertainty have a different physiological effect, a different psychological effect. Complexity as well, physiological effect too. Ambiguity have a lot of, give confusion in decision, lack of clarity, and it really impacts mental well-being, as Dr. Leisman will explain. And hyperconnectedness is very important because we have a lot of fake news. We spend our time with our cell phone and not to think. So the brain is where the remediation happens. So because you will participate in this event, we will send you a link to have healing music. And there is one to make you relax. There is one to help you to sleep. And there is one to make you more alert when you wake up. We have received an authorization to distribute 8 million for free of those things to help the population in Israel. So yes, we help through technology, but also through psychology. So now it's my pleasure to introduce my partner, my friend, and the co-conductor of this event. So, Neville.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abram. And that's a very wide spectrum, but hopefully an introduction as to what's about to follow. And all the people that follow me are going to have their own little specialist areas that are very unique in many respects, but they all come together, as we'll see at the end. So where do I fit in all this? Well, I work in the realm of performance. I'm in business through and through, corporate life, SME life, 45 years in business, international business. And the key thing is, it's not just about business performance, but team performance, more importantly, personal performance. So next slide. And on this slide, you'll see, if you look at yourself as an individual or your organization, whether this is your life or your professional life, and look at yourself as a jigsaw, you'll see actually the jigsaw has got many, many parts that haven't been identified or even filled in. And the more you look at yourself, actually, the bigger the picture in the middle becomes empty. So let's not worry about that too much. But it's your personal journey. So you're going to fill up this jigsaw. Now, just for a minute, imagine all of the people that you aspire to. You know, whether it's Elon Musk or Richard Branson or a great political leader, whoever that is, how do you think they fill their jigsaw? Do they fill it by predefined pieces and then they go and solve the piece? Or do they reflect on what they've done and create a piece that fits somewhere? Now, while you're thinking about the answer is they do both. So they actually design where they're going, but they also reflect on where they've been. So they're constantly changing the shape of that jigsaw. So moving further on, let's move into a more detailed arena. So next slide, please. Now, this was my introduction. I left corporate life in 2002. I'd had enough at the ripe old age of 43 years old, and I retired. I was fortunate enough to work in the oil and gas industry, which gave me a nice big lump sum to basically do nothing about. However, my wife, being who she is, kicked me out of the house and said, "You're not staying in the house doing nothing for the rest of your life. Get out there and do something." And I did, and I found this. And going back to the jigsaw's a map. We create our own maps around the world we live. And if you live in a VUCAH world, by the way, we all live in a VUCAH world, get over it. It's there. You can't affect the world, you can only affect what you do. Well, this is a map. This is the first behavioral map that I stumbled upon in the early 2000s. A guy called Graham Williams had designed this with from the John Whitmore School of Coaching. So if anyone knows, John Whitmore was the first person really to bring sports coaching into the business world. So this has its origins in John Whitmore's teachings, if you like. Now I'm going to explain the map very simply, but I want you to focus on the top piece. Where people consistently operate from dictates our success or failure. And I'm sure most people have heard of the saying, if you think you can do something or you think you can't do something, you're right. Well, that was Henry Ford back in the 1920s. And be honest with you, he's absolutely right. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So yeah, as you can see, if you were to look at the continuum in psychology, can't do is on the left at the bottom, can do is on the right at the top. But there's this little dog leg to the right. They won't do. These are the saboteurs in the corporate world that do things for the benefit of themselves and for the organization. But if it's not for the benefit of themselves, they don't do it. So they really do make things not happen. And all the can't do people, as I've put little boxes here, they just ignore things and avoid it. So I'm an accountant, okay? So I know people that get a very difficult invoice at the end of the day. Let's say it's 4:30, and they'll think, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll stick it in the top drawer. And they'll come in the following morning, and they still think it's difficult to do, and it's still there literally until month end, and all of a sudden the floodgates open. That's the reality. You know, these people are can't do's. They ignore and avoid. The won't do's make excuses and block. Oh, we've done it before and it didn't work. Not we've done it before, it didn't work, but let's see if we can make a few changes to see if it works. Then you're a can-do person. So these can-do people explore and they act. And each in these three stations, there are four things always going on: how we think, how we feel, what drives us, and our social connectivity. It's a different way of looking at the brain, but all of these four elements are always in place no matter what you're doing. And the key to that is what you're driven by. A lot of people will call this the purpose. Dr. Abraham and I have a lot of discussions about what drives you, what's your purpose. Hopefully as the end of this session comes on, you'll find out exactly what does drive us. Okay, next slide. Now, what MindFit do, just very briefly, is that we work across the whole spectrum. We work with the C-suite, right the way down to the shop floor, with small businesses, collaborative businesses, but also with long-term unemployed, homeless, refugees. Everything we do works in all of these areas, because all we're doing is developing can-do people. But what we have is, in our C-suite arena, we have two choice programs, two flagship programs. One is called our Predator program, and the other one is called our Reality-Driven Leaders roles. Now, within reality-driven leadership, and notice the words reality-driven, you don't work in the land of perception. You've created that jigsaw, and you have been honest with yourself of how you're going to fill that jigsaw. So in essence, we have 5 things that goes on in a reality leader. And those 5 things are in anything we do. So it doesn't have to be the C-suite, but it could be a junior level entry. So it's how we literally navigate around what we're doing. And the first one is we need to investigate. We need to look at the reality. What's going on in this organization? Not what people are saying it is, not what HR have come up with a nice little questionnaire. You know, we go and delve into the reality and we investigate what's there. And then we need to, once we've investigated, we need to try and innovate around that investigation. Because again, it's going to be new. Whether it's VUCAH or whether it's what other reason, it's a new thing. So we need to take that suggestion of what's going on and innovate around it. And then we need to navigate that into a very complex arena that we're currently working in. So in other words, we've got to change what we do in quite a complex navigational type of way. Then we didn't measure it, because there's no point in making a change if you don't measure it. And once you've measured it, you can then go back and say, did it work? And we can investigate more. So this is a perpetual circle here, which is all internal, but there's one external role, and I will call it the non-exec, because we need to look what's happening elsewhere. Can we take something from another industry and bring it into ours? That's actually, to be honest with you, I think they should redefine what a non-exec does. You know, because you don't need a non-exec that's very good in your own world. You need a non-exec to challenge your world and bring in other things that are happening elsewhere. I'm a non-exec in a number of companies, and I bring in what's working really well in different industries into the industries we're talking about. It's so easy to do, but if you've got a can-do attitude, and that's where this resilience issue we always come back to. People that are very resilient have a can-do attitude. It was even said in the presentation right at the very beginning. So next slide, please. This is at the other end of the scale. It's a book I put together a little while ago, Everything You Should Have Learned at School But Didn't. It's nothing to do with academics. It's everything to do with soft skills and attitudes.
Assalamualaikum everyone. Arush Malik, a contributor to the
Saad Malak Khan, and I'm one of the contributors to this book by Nabil called Everything You Should Have Learned in School. But
Hi, this is Rosin, one of the contributors to Everything You Should Have Learned.
Assalamualaikum everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce the beautiful book created by a galaxy of professionals from all around the world, led by Neville Khan.
Hello everyone. This is Rosina Asif from Islam.
Assalamualaikum. Hi, namaste. I'm Asma Tariq. I'm from Gujarat, Pakistan. I'm one of the youngest.
Imagine having over a dozen mentors accessible to you, sharing openly and freely their struggles, their breakthroughs, their achievements. Wouldn't that be nice?
That's just a snippet of who's contributed to that book. The book's freely available. Anyone would like it, please contact Abraham and we'll arrange to get you a copy. But it comes back to this now word that I always use all the time, collaboration, because the reason why collaboration is difficult is because it's got too many syllables. Collaboration, 5 syllables. And you try to do that on a discovery arena. You know, it's really quite difficult to work out how people collaborate. Now, I've come from the most competitive industry in the world in oil and gas, and yet without collaboration, we wouldn't be paying the same price for gas. Trust me, it would be very, very expensive. So we've had to go through this collaboration route. So I work with very competitive people around the world. That's helped me to see things in a slightly different perspective than normally. Oil and gas is the only collaborative industry in the world. Anyone wants to challenge me on that, please do. If we can have a discussion on LinkedIn, we can even have a panel on LinkedIn if you like, but it is the only collaboration industry in the world. If we go on to the next slide, because this is now why I report collaboration, because this is where Dr. Abraham and I met. He was there with Mindful Joyce. We met over LinkedIn. He and I literally had several discussions backwards and forwards about MindFit being action-based and his background being thinking. So between us, we commonly say he's the thinker, I'm the doer. But we've come together with this word resilience, because no matter how easy our programs are to do, they're a lot easier if you've built internal resilience. If someone shouts at you, but are shouting some very interesting words you should be listening to, and your resilience is so high, you're listening, then you'll take on that feedback, because that's all it is, it's feedback. So and if you look around the world, all of the best leaders in the world are highly resilient. It's as far as they're concerned, it's not personal, which is ironic, because once you've got yourself in the business, there's nothing more than being personal than being in the business. In fact, a good friend of mine wrote, It's Business, It's Personal, an interesting book. And of course it's personal, but you need to be able to take that personal out of business decisions. And that's where, again, where resilience comes in. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentation. I'm just going to finish on that little umbrella, because once we're resilient to anything, then actually life's a lot easier.
Thank you, Neville. Dr. Leisman, join us or not?
I just did.
You did. Okay. So, Dr. Leisman, the floor is yours.
Very good. So in which case, if I could have the next slide, actually the first slide. In the background, you see a picture of Haifa, which is the city. I'm about 15 minutes away. You're all cordially invited to turn up. The big tall urinal in the picture is where my lab is. I'm in the basement. The president is on top. That actually has something to do with what we're talking about, because I'm underground, and so therefore I'm more protected, whereas he's on the top floor and he's less. But I'm just a peon and he is the president of the university. That having been said, let's have the next slide. And I will use compressed speech. We've already heard about VUCAH, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Well, what I'm going to try to do in compressed speech in the short time available to us is to put these concepts together in terms of the context of neuroscience, what we understand, both developmentally, both professionally, both as it relates to the aging process, and actually as it relates to work. Very quickly, can I have the next slide, please? Here we have an example of the concept of uncertainty. Most of the things that happen to us in life are relatively certain. That is, we do the same thing again and again, and I'm sorry for speaking so quickly. That is, we don't pay attention to the things that recur because the likelihood of our getting hurt is significantly less than if we don't know what's going on. So, for example, if you take here in Israel right now, the number of deaths, except for October 7th, the number of deaths that occur from terrorism is basically slim to nil. It almost never happens, and yet there's this perception that there's a fair degree of danger and potential damage. Actually, our road traffic accidents are pretty pathetic. We have roughly 1 death a day. It's about 350 in a 9 million population over the course of the year. So there's a great likelihood of getting hurt or actually dead from a motor vehicle accident than there is from terrorism, except for the recent events. And what we can do is we can parlay this into a number of applications, one of which is the issue of political uncertainty. Another is in terms of cognitive uncertainty of any kind. And what we can say is that with looking at oxygen absorption in the brain using functional magnetic resonance imagery, a big term, basically allowing us to take a look at brain images while the human is performing, we can actually look at how uncertainty is represented in the brain. Next slide, please. So given the nature of ambiguity and threat, can we actually measure the pathways that are highly associated with ambiguity and threat? And ambiguity and threat does not necessarily have to be physical, because as we will see in our definition of stress, which Selye defined as anything that is perceived as being physically and or psychologically injurious to the organism, any organism, we know that there are certain biological markers that are associated with that kind of ambiguity and threat, and largely it's associated with changes in the autonomic nervous system, including increases in blood pressure, heart rate, respiratory rate, pilomotor response, the hair standing on end, muscle tension, and an increase in a substance called adrenal corticotrophic hormone, ACTH, which is underneath what suppresses the immune system. And so we're immune compromised. We have all of these autonomic responses, and that gets in the way of decision making. Next slide, please. So developmentally, we have what are called small versus large world networks. Explain that. I have a new grandson. He's 6 months old. He operates on the basis of small world networks, which means one area of the brain concerns itself with a particular task and another area of the brain concerns itself with a different task. That's probably what you guys have learned in Introduction to Psychology way back when. Unfortunately, big people behavior doesn't work that way. That is, what we try to do is we put together these mini networks into larger networks, and that allows us to behave effectively. So one example would be that if we want to look at language, well, no, language is not represented in the temporal areas in front of an area called the Sylvian fissure and behind it. It's actually represented in the entire brain, dependent upon what words that you hear. So there are different networks that are associated with legs as opposed to faces. And the same thing is also true with how we learn how to adapt to life. That is, we have automatic responses that create these networks, and they're pretty much lifelong. So any change in human behavior, any increase in resilience is going to penultimately be a consequence of how these networks are put together. Talk therapy can have an effect in that area. So too can mechanisms of learning how to be more resilient. Next slide, please, which we can do through virtual systems. And what we can see in this slide are histologies of a 5-day-old neonate as opposed to a 6-year-old child, as opposed to an adult. And you can see that the 5-day-old infant is more closely related to the adult than to the 6-year-old child. Why? Because in the case of the 6-year-old child, we're learning how to develop new networks. And because of the work of Rita Levi-Montalcini, who received the Nobel Prize for nerve growth factor, we know that if you don't use it, you lose it. Why is that? Because we need to automate human behavior as much as we possibly can. And whatever we don't use, whatever cells don't connect with each other, are disappeared. And that's the kind of model we see in the adult. Next slide, please. So stress causes dendritic expansion in the corresponding neurons within the orbitofrontal cortex here. And in the bottom, neurons in the infralimbic cortex lose distal dendritic branches with stress. Next slide, and it explains it much more clearly. Next slide, please. So here you have an example of normal interconnectivities in the normal portion, the upper portion of the slide. And underneath, with toxic stress, you see that there's a paucity of those interconnections, dendritic interconnections, in that area of the brain, that the prefrontal cortex, that involves decision-making, and also in the hippocampus, which involves memory. So memory and adaptability are going to be compromised as a consequence of stress. And stress is very easily defined in terms of lack of resilience. That is, resilient people do much better with handling stress than non-resilient people. So anything that is involved in our ability to foment mechanisms for reducing stress will affect resilience. Next slide, please. So here's an example of one of the very few laws in the behavioral sciences, the Yerkes-Dodson law, which means if you have a non-stress environment, you cannot function. If you have a overly high-stressed environment, you cannot function. So we're looking for an optimum level of stress for human arousal for us to perform optimally. Next slide, please. Here we've just put some concepts around that Yerkes-Dodson graph. And you can see the difference between boredom, which renders you pretty much inactive, and breakdown burnout is on the other side of that curve. And you'll, of course, have these slides to peruse at your own leisure later on. Next slide, please. So resilience is the ability, if we're going to put together what we've said so far, is the ability to cope with setbacks, adversity, and trauma. And a misconception about resilience that it's that you won't experience any difficulties. Hell no. We have difficulties every moment in life. What we don't have, many of us do not have, is the ability to cope with those difficulties in life. So resilience, in other words, refers to how one manages the stresses of life, whether we do it skillfully and successfully or not. And resilience helps in personal growth, gives a better and newer perspective to life, and makes you more efficient on the job. Next slide, please. The good Lord, in her infinite wisdom, definitely the she piece of the concept of a divinity. Anyone who's been in divorce court knows why there's a female component to this, shows that if you do not handle your stress, you will get sick. If you do not handle getting sick, you will die. And so what we have is a built-in mechanism to get the hero, like a deus ex machina in a Greek play, to get the hero away from the stressful situation. Next slide, please. So resilience and neuroplasticity are complementary concepts. By neuroplasticity, we mean chemicals, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, that are associated with motor activity, with movement, and also with the ability to create new connections, new connectivities within the brain. We know that through neuroplasticity, we can achieve resilience. And neuroplasticity is how our brains get trained to change the neural networks, as we indicated previously, by growth and reorganization. These synaptic connections can be resynced by learning and rigorous training, which is underneath what we're talking about today. Next slide, please. So there are numerous brain structures that are involved in the resilience, one of which, of course, is the amygdala. And the amygdala is part of the brain that's most responsive to emotional behavior. So any kind of emotional behavior can be triggered by the amygdala. And the neurons which extend from the amygdala are triggered due to fear and stress. The object of the exercise in resilient people is to have the amygdala relatively quiet. That's what happens with automatic behavior. So if you do something that's nominally dangerous to other people, but not necessarily, you don't see it that way, which means you're used to it because you do it again and again, it won't trip off the amygdala. Next slide, please. So resilience, as we've indicated, implicates plasticity. Next slide, please. And plasticity relies on the neurobiological systems that underpin social fitness, physical stamina, endurance, and as individuals flexibly adapt to diverse situations. Next slide, please. One of the ways that generate these chemicals, oxytocin in particular, is by social interconnectivity. It's one of the substances that's involved in mother-child interaction, for example. We fathers can have it as well, but it's significantly involved in mother-child interaction, and it's generated both through brain-derived neurotrophic factors, increases, as well as resonance effects between parent and child or parent and infant. And it's exactly the same chemical and also the same resilience that's involved in adult interpersonal relationships, especially on the jobs. So the plasticity component of resilience has two features. One is it's integrative and regulatory. It actually regulates the physiology. And the other factor is that it's time-based. Next slide. I'm running out of time, but I'll very quickly run through this. Regulation promotes flexible integration of system components into a functional whole, and regulation adopts a system perspective and describes how components of a system get together into a functional whole. Next slide, please. Next slide. We know that resilience is time-based. That is, it's time-bound and it's process-based, which means that it develops from simple to complex and from biological to mental. The entire system that we're talking about is a biological system that's based in the amygdala, it's time-based, it's process-based, and it's associated with social interaction. So social movements unfold in time when there are two or more participants involved, and they create a dance between two people. You can't dance. You have two left feet, so to speak, socially. You will not succeed in what it is that you're doing. Next slide. So resilience is social, it's time-based. Next slide, please. Next. Next. And there are a number of chemicals associated with. Next slide. And the last point that I really wanted to make about all of this and putting this into an overall physiological context is the issue of meaning. We human beings search for meaning. Is there any meaning in life? Quite frankly, no. The only purpose that we have in life is to produce fertile offspring. You don't do that, you're a dud. And that our children have our genes. So in fact, we actually do have eternal life. We want to discuss philosophy and theology. I'd love to do that, but not here. In any event, what we are talking about is seeking meaning. So we humans have the ability to give meaning to trauma, which utilizes collective cultural and religious myths that can build personal meaning through actions. In other words, why did this happen to me? I don't understand what God meant when this happened. So we seek meaning in being able to create and coalesce groups together. And it's the group that supports human interaction, and it's the group that supports resilience. It could be religious, it could be cultural, it could be business, it could be a membership organization, it could be the Masons. It doesn't make any difference what it is, Freemasons. It doesn't make any difference what it is. Next slide, please. So, in summary, William James, in The Will to Believe, considered that belief is an integral choice for resilience, enabling an individual to create personally meaningful reality, giving significance to trauma and hardship. Meaning introduces a future dimension to resilience, adding a time horizon beyond the remembered presence. The remembered presence is what primates have. We don't. What we have is oxytocin that supports resilience that's highly associated with social interaction. It's the social piece that's underneath what it is that we're talking about. Next slide. So neural structures that cohere into the affiliative brain are formed very, very early in sensitive periods. In other words, you don't have effective parenting, you're going to have a problem with flexibility, and you're going to have a concomitant problem with resilience. Next slide, please. And that should end it for us. One last comment, and that is, we looked at MRIs of Palestinian and Israeli Jewish teenagers when they were looking at damage to the opposite group. We found that there was empathy, which lasted roughly for a couple of seconds. And beyond that, it became the affiliated group that supported resilience. We had no empathy for the opposite group. So social interaction neurologically is the key to resilience. And with that, any further depth, please get in touch. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I need to indicate that Dr. Leisman is the scientific and research director of our institute. I think I need to explain that he is in charge of the validation of all the new technology and research. And more importantly, he's a very good friend. But you see, you have something in common with most of us. We are not too young. You are not too old either.
Speak for yourself.
But our age, we have same age, Madam. At our age, we don't want to lose time. We want to contribute as much we can with the time we have, and we are not ready to compromise our reputation. That's why everything we do in the Mental Wellness Society, in all the activity, in JIRA, everywhere, if it is not based, not data-driven, but scientifically proven, we don't talk about it. And that's something very important to indicate. Isaac.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Meyer. My goodness, we are already drowning in amazing content. Drowning is a negative verb. We could find a positive verb for that. So much great content here. I've been taking notes and enjoying it. Very quickly, I'm going to go as well, try to speed talk to allow as much time as possible for those who follow me. So if you go to the next slide, very little bit about me on the next slide, really who I am, where I come from. I'm also from the business side of how do we engage with corporations? How do we make businesses and organizations better? I'll just draw attention to the bottom. I focus my skills and what I've been learning and developing and sharing with the world really around coaching and enabling. I want to coach and enable individuals, coach and enable teams, and coach and enable organizations to be the very best they can. And so on that vein, here at the Mental Wellness Society, for this question, can HR impact resilience in a VUCAH world? I have 3 words for you. Next slide. Those 3 words are, and we'll go through them very quickly, results, and the next word is change, and the next word is systems. And that's fine. I'll just go. I have an updated slide deck. I'm just going to talk for a minute. You can keep this up here. That works for me. Let me talk to you about those 3 words, results and change and systems, right? So number 1, results. There is so much demand all around us for results. Every company, every organization, they're demanding get more with less and get it now. I'm sure you feel that pressure. I'm sure you feel the do more with less and make it happen. And here's the deadline. The market is pressing for more growth, more returns, more of everything. And then you switch to the individual side, right? We've got social media, and all around you see people who have it much better than you do. And so there's this demand for more results. If I can't, juggle 15 chainsaws, juggling 2 apples is just not impressive. And so there's this pressure for more, 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 more. And so we have to recognize that in that pressure-filled state, as we're driven for more results, that can cause what we just heard about, that stress, right? Inside of us, we can have that fear of danger to us, whether we're losing our status or respect or our job. And that fear can create those stress responses, which shut down so much of the decision-making, so much of the innovation and the brainstorming that we want people to bring into the corporate world to make a difference. So one more thing on results. When we talk about results, there are the ones that I would say are urgent, the fires, and those in the business world. They're the got to do it now, the customer's complaining, drop what you're doing and do this. And so many people I work with spend their days putting out fires, spend their days chasing that urgent result. And yet the important work of helping the individual to grow in their career, establishing healthy patterns and processes inside our organizations, the effort to create an environment for people to grow and learn, that is important, but it gets drowned out by the urgent, right? So the results we focus on, sometimes we need to be intentional about fighting for those important results and not just fighting for the urgent, whatever the demand is of the moment. So let's talk about second word, results. Second word is change. All around us, there's change. I love the agile practices and frameworks, Scrum, Kanban, all of these things. They focus really on change as a way of getting things done, right? So how do we get the objective? How do we achieve the business result in a VUCAH world using these agile practices, techniques, and approaches? And so those are all wonderful. We can use those to overcome change, but it does not do anything to address how we as people handle change. If your environment changes from under you, what you expected doesn't happen. If you find yourself feeling threatened, we've heard about stress already. We've heard about things that constrict us and close us down. And so even though we recognize positive change for the individual, the team, and the organization is what we need, we are very bad at enabling and equipping that in the current corporate setting. Why? Because we're fighting those fires, right? We've got all those fires and things we have to fight. So when we look at Mind Evoke and all of the Mental Wellness Society content, when I see its application in the corporate world, I see us being able to encourage individuals to develop that resilience that we just heard about. That resilience will decrease the stress and enable effective and healthy change in a complex, demanding, fast-paced corporate world. So as HR individuals, what can I do to impact resilience in this VUCA world? It's enabling healthy change really through that resilience is how you can do it. So we've got results. There's the demanding results, and then there's the results of helping people to achieve their goals. Then you've got change. And the last thing I want to talk to you about is systems. We can't just think about these things in isolation. We have to think about them in light of a larger system, right? There is a whole system impact going on. And if you disagree with that, we were talking about the VUCA world earlier, right? You've got things like the pandemic, right? That impacted everyone. And we discovered how brittle our supply chains were. You have acquisitions at a company, right? So we just bought another company and we incorporated them and our cultures are clashing. Or you could even have life events in your personal, the birth or death of a loved one, something changing in your personal world. All of these things impact the total system. So as an Agile coach, we look holistically. We don't want to just say, well, let's just deal with this little piece of the person while they're at work. It's much larger than that. And that's what I love about the Mental Wellness Society is it enables looking at the whole person, who they are at home, who they are at work, who they are with their family, who they are with their friends, who they are under crisis, who they are while a pandemic is happening. And it has tools that we can use to address all of those. So results, we looked at change, we looked at systems. So let me bring this in for a close. So what we are trying to do with this is to increase awareness for people in the corporate world, right? Understand that there are things you can do to make sure that you have those positive results and you enable your people to be the best they can. You're learning about a lot of it today. We also are providing tools and training. There's a lot of this that we are making available, not only this webinar, but books and resources and materials that you can begin to infuse into your systems. I'll tell you this, it will take time. You will need to invest your time in diffusing this through your organizations, or you won't see the benefit of it. And the alternative is don't focus on any of this and just let the fires keep prevailing, the stress keep happening, and you'll continue to see the levels of burnout and quiet quitting and frustration amongst your employees and your organization that you might already be feeling. What we also offer, which is very exciting, is the corporate level systemic improvement, right? So when we look at a corporation, how can we change things for the whole organization? We can change them through a number of things. We're introducing this idea of a corporate resilience officer who is responsible for making sure the organization grows in its resilience from the individuals to the teams. We're introducing wellness rooms. You'll hear a little bit more about all of these ideas. Wellness rooms, a place people can go to take a breath, step away from the hurried pace of your normal day. We're introducing training cohorts. We're introducing coaching. Those are things that we can support in organizations to help increase that resilience awareness. So to wrap up, and my final thought here is, what is the question that we hope you're asking from this webinar? How do we take away, and what's the question we're asking? And when I think about how your goals are achieved, my hope is that you think, I need to change my systems. How do I do that? The organization I serve, how do I change those systems? And my hope is that you can apply the 3 words that I've been talking about. Results change systems. They're not results like we just got, 10% more increase, but results in supporting your people, being the amazing HR people you are. Results with your people will change your systems, and you'll see better results for the business on the other side. So that's all of my time. We'll get the slides updated for you guys in the afterwards, but thank you, Dr. Meyer.
Dr. Kelly, I know you start late and you will finish later. I know that.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Thank you for joining us. Let's go. So I'm a psychologist and a neuropsychologist who also used to be a corporate executive. So I have an inside view, having worked for a Fortune 500 company and also as a psychologist. So I'm going to talk to you about how do we actually enact change. Let's go. Next slide, please. So I'm going to tell you today, again, why resilience is integral to your company's survival and to your own flourishing. Talk about, well, how do you cope in a VUCA world? How do you bring that or change that uncertainty that you're feeling every single day at work? We're going to introduce you to the mindful choice strategies that were developed by Dr. Meyer and Dr. Robert Leibovitz. And we're going to talk to you about why is it that your corporate mission statements don't always work? And what else can you do basing goals and destination on moving yourself and your teams forward? And what does research tell us about corporate flourishing? All right, let's go. So first of all, you guys, you have to remember all business is people business. You're not in the shoe business. You're not in the car business. You're not in the oil business. You're in the people business. So as HR people, you need to recognize your own assets and also the assets of every member of your team. It's like you're only as strong as your weakest person. What is the uniqueness of your organization? What's the uniqueness of your service or product? What are the character strengths that you bring to HR? And how do you recognize and bring out the character strengths of your team members and your C-suite executives? Next slide. So one of the key aspects of building resilience in your corporation or in your workplace is you have to understand this concept. In order to enact change, you have to change the way you think. That's going to then change the way you feel and then change the way you act. So this is a fabric of leadership. You have to create a more positive, a more effective mindset. Are you able to change the way you think about your position? Are you able to change the way that your team members think about what they bring to your organization, what their purpose is, what the destination is? And the destination is not a mission statement. That's a journey statement or a statement that was developed by a consulting firm for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let's go on. Okay, resilience in a VUCA world. You cannot think your way out of stress. You cannot think your way out of anxiety. You cannot think your way out of uncertainty, okay? So my biggest, I guess, letter in this VUCA world is the U right now, the uncertainty. That is what your employees are dealing with. That's probably what you're dealing with in your own job. It's what the C-suite executives are dealing with in a very volatile world. What's the opposite of uncertainty? It's not certainty. The opposite of uncertainty is trusting yourself. And how do you do that? Let's go to the next slide. So as Dr. Leishman said, resilience is a matrix. It's not just one thing. It's not just coping. It's these four things. These are things that are actually factors that have been discovered in research. It's coping. It's having emotional intelligence, knowing about yourself, knowing how you think. It's grit, that stick-to-itiveness, not giving up, moving forward. And then 4, finding or creating, rather, meaning and purpose in your job and in your life, okay? So this is a great quote, resilient people. All right. We don't just focus on the problem. We say, what's the solution to that? What is this trying to teach me? What does this setback mean? How can I move forward from this? What can we do better? Next slide. All right. So as I said, you cannot just think your way out of uncertainty or stress or anxiety in the workplace. You have to do something about it. The brain is responsible for problem solving. The brain wants you to take action. The brain's meant to take action. So recognize, what is that default mode that I've had in a crisis situation? Do I freeze? Do I flee? Do I fight? Do I fawn? Okay. So we're going to just think about changing your default mode to one of inaction to action. Change your thoughts, shift your attention, change your direction. Let's go. Next slide. So here are the key points, and you can take a screenshot of this. It's about surviving in the VUCAH world. Learn how to reason, not be reactive, be more proactive, anticipate, be more proactive, right? There are 3 things that you can control in your life and in your job. And no, it's not other people. The 3 things you can control: your attitude, your preparation, and your effort. Okay? Learn how to communicate more effectively. Identify where you're going. What's your destination? Learn about what is your motivation and the motivation of others. How to get them motivated. Next slide. Ever feel like you're trapped in a maze? Ever feel like someone's moved the cheese that was in the middle of the maze? Who's moved my cheese? Well, what do? But next slide. Okay. So as I said earlier, it's actually about your destination and the company's destination, not the journey. Where are you going? Where do you want to be a year from now? As an HR executive, and that's a great question to ask your employees. What's the goal? Where are we moving as a company? Okay, so if you don't know your destination, where your destination is, you will not be able to cope or deal effectively with obstacles that come in your way. You'll be distracted. Next slide. Okay, so University of Pennsylvania did a study. Martin Seligman's group there, they looked at American corporations and companies over 200 years. Oh, they went back 200 years, and they found that these 3 factors loaded for flourishing, not just survival. You don't want your team, you don't want your company just to survive, right? You're not going to get a promotion as an HR person if you just survive. You want the team and the company to flourish. These are the 3 things. Your company and your team, they need to have agency. So that's a belief that they can enact change. They have to have optimism, positive attitude. The future is better than it is now. We believe in ourselves that we can make it better also. And then imagination and ingenuity. Does your company allow for imagination? If it doesn't, it won't flourish. And imagination, guess what? That also involves the ability to change, to have agility and optimism. The 3 factors are interconnected. Next slide. All right. So as you know, you have got to be stronger. Your brain has to be stronger than the emotions, right? So I'm not saying to deny how you feel, deny your fears, or deny your employees' concerns or anxieties about living in a VUCAH world. Managing your emotions is not the same as denying them. We're not denying emotions. We're learning how to manage them and how to harness that power of the stress you might feel or the anxiety you might feel. That's energy. So we can harness it with mindful choice strategies. Next slide. Okay, so what are mindful choice strategies and what's the system? Basically, again, it's a system that shows you how to change the way you think so that you can change the way you feel and change the way you act for better performance overall. Next slide. So we use a process, we kick it off with metacognition. Simply, metacognition is thinking about thinking, knowing about knowing, okay? Thinking about how your thought processes work. Next slide. All right, and we use cards, we use visuals because visual anchors like these cards help the people we work with, help the people we coach understand the concept faster and more effectively, and it gets coded in their brain so they can think, oh yeah, it's this card, it's this concept, that's what I have to do. When I don't know what to do, I'm going to deploy this tactic, this strategy. Next slide. And I think, Gerard, I think we have like 80, is it 88 slide, 88
90,
cards?
90.
90. So when we work with companies, we work in showing them how do you utilize these 90 visuals, these 90 cards, and there's many ways that we do it in our coaching. It's a very exciting and new way of motivating people on your team to be more productive, to handle stress better, and also to find the solutions faster. Next slide. So one of the key philosophies and strategies is we go, where I call it, I play the what, not why game. Why? Asking yourselves or asking your members, why are you doing it this way? Or why are you feeling this way? Or why are you burned out? Is not ever going to get you the answer. Instead, ask the what. The what leads you to action. So instead of saying, well, why am I feeling burned out? You ask, well, what is this feeling trying to alert you to? What's this feeling trying to tell you? You see the difference? And then you go into, well, what might I be needing? What might I be able to do about it? What's this telling me? This feeling might be telling me, you know what? I have a lot of knowledge gaps. So I just want to go back real quick, Gerard. Thank you. So when we coach and we work with HR people and executives, we go through the process in a much slower way and digestible way. But we bring in these proven strategies to get your team to think differently about what's keeping them back, keeping them from flourishing, and how to be better problem solvers and more strategic. Next slide. So, Mindful Choice System is a 21st century life-changing process of personal effectiveness, okay? It's based on 20 years of research and experience, more than 20 years, okay? And it's a system. It's a system that uses workbooks, visuals, sessions of coaching. We guide you through it. And the HR executives who I've worked personally using this find that they are now not only better at helping to manage difficult situations, but they also find that they now can manage yearly reviews, quarterly reviews with employees in a much better way by using our system. Thanks so much. And then if you're interested, please follow up with us, okay?
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Sherek. Sherek, Peck.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, Dr. Meyer. Dr. Kelly, that was a wonderful introduction to some things that I need to present on. I am a physical therapist, and next slide, please. I've spent much of the last 20 years working with large companies to try and reduce injuries. And along the way, I have found some wonderful ways to be able to enhance and improve the ability for the human nervous system to function better and find happy. Next slide, please. If you were to put a face to VUCAH, it would be much like this. But I don't want you to think of the expression here. I want you to think of what is actually happening underneath that. And if you go to the next slide, please. It's a simple concept. It's simply like a seesaw or a teeter-totter between two major nerves in the nervous system. One being the trigeminal nerve that is a big part of showing the expression that you just saw, and the other is the vagus nerve. And the problem is that the vagus nerve is the one that keeps our thinking brain on track, and the trigeminal nerve and its desire to keep the body alive for another day keeps us in this state of VUCAH. Next slide, please. One of the things that we have found is that if we can keep the vagus nerve functioning at a very high level, we modulate the inflammation, we strengthen the memory, it helps us to breathe, it increases salivation, it does all of these wonderful things that help us to be able to survive and thrive and flourish. Next slide, please. Well, there are a number of technologies that will help us keep our thinking brain online when we're going through crisis and when we're going through a VUCAH world. In particular, there are several validated tools that we have found that are extremely helpful. The binaural pulse modulation, the BOD system, has been validated for PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Sound and healing music therapies by Dr. Jeffrey Thompson are wonderful. Dr. Kelly just shared with you something absolutely amazing, which is the evoke system and thought processes. But it's very important in the world that we live in that we learn how to take our nervous system and the amygdala, as Dr. Leisman talked about, and we learn to keep our brain from being hijacked in that fight or flight or freeze or fawn state. And we've got to get it back into the thinking process. Well, some of these scientifically validated tools are wonderful to be able to keep the brain in a present state and keep it aware. One of them that I work with is this little device, the Tuner Pro. We created this to help bring balance to the central nervous system. And we combine it with breathing and we combine it with thought processes, and the evoke system is wonderful for that. It helps to imprint into the nervous system the way to get back into that calm and productive state. Next slide, please.
I already presented that.
Yes, yes. And here's a little bit more about the BOD, and I hope that that you'll be able to spend some time and learn about these processes. Next slide, please. We use the anatomical connections as an entryway into the central nervous system. All of these tools can help us do that. The BOD uses the acoustic and auditory systems. Ours, the resonance tools, the vibrational tools of the tuner, creates a way for the central nervous system via the vagus nerve to keep its calm, collective, and healing state at a high level. All of these tools have been scientifically validated. Dr. Leisman has been extremely helpful in that regard. They're rooted in neuroscience. They improve resilience, and they speed up the body's ability to recover, even for just little micro breaks in this VUCAH world. In essence, keeping your employees' brain engaged, their prefrontal cortex and their frontal cortex online, so that they can be a more productive part of the solution. Next slide. Thank you.
Scott Duncan, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Gerard.
Okay, Scott, I will ask you, I know you from so many years. I will ask you to try to go quick enough so Salome have also sometimes to present.
Yes, sir. Okay, my name is Scott Duncan. I'm a chiropractor, consultant, author, and worked with Dr. Meyer a quarter of a century ago. A lot of this that we're talking about today is rooted back in when he was president and CEO of Carnegie Mellon's Driver Training and Safety Institute. Go ahead and next slide. One of the core foundational ideas is your body hears everything your mind says, and your mind remembers everything your body feels. So there's a mind-body, body-mind axis that if we can address them together, accelerate and create lasting results. Next slide. So at the turn of the millennium, Dr. Meyer initiated the Driver Training and Safety Institute, where we trained truck drivers and emergency vehicle operators. Back in the day, the engaged person was the talk of HR in the corporate model to help foster an engaged person with more retention, more safety, better productivity, client loyalty, and profitability. Now, go ahead and go to the next slide. At that time, we deployed numerous departments in order to address the comprehensive issue of safer, more competent drivers. On the upper left-hand side, there is a Teflon-coated airport runway equipped with plumbing to create a skid so that drivers would learn how to drive certain skills while they're actually on the road. In the middle slide on the top row, before there were smartphones, there was a smart truck that was wired electronically with dozens and dozens of sensors to understand how the driver was operating the vehicle and then train in best practices. In the upper right, there's computer-based training, which is now online. It used to be in the classroom. And the middle slide on the bottom was the health and wellness department, which is what I was in charge of developing and integrating in with the other departments. And we found that learning is stressful and change is painful. And a person's intuitive response is fight, flight, freeze. That's a barrier to learning in this environment and actually in our environment today. So we used particular tools to create a counterintuitive response, which was focus on the solution rather than being frozen in fight, flight, freeze. Next slide. So we used instruments and devices and processes to measure baselines and outcomes at the Research Institute. We used, in the Health and Wellness Department, we used physical measurements, we used instrument surveys for baseline assessments, and a pre-test on a person's knowledge of well-being. Go to the next slide. And then we have an outcome. So it was an 8-week program at the Driver Training and Safety Institute. So we had a beginning, we go through the process. In the health and wellness, we got 1 hour a day or 40 hours total out of the 8-week program. Go to the next slide. HAL would be a representative sample of class 22, and 1,400 people went through this program. So physically, HAL would reduce his body fat from 32.3% to 24.2%. Body impairment, which is range of motion, impaired range of motion is restricted motion that impairs performance, dropped it from 29% whole body to 15%, improved his knowledge and his cardiovascular capacity. What was really important with the representative of HAL was this quote: "I learned new stretching techniques, how to strengthen muscles, I stopped smoking, and my mind is more clear and focused. It motivated me to work out and stay with it, and more family members are working out." So the outcome, if you were an HR and you put your HAL that was an employee at your company through this process, you would have someone that is healthier, more engaged, social, and has sustainability as far as his healthy habits that he developed. Next slide. And so when the research project stopped, Gerard went on with his other founders to develop the Mental Wellness Society, Mind Evoke, and these tools. What I did was I went back to Lincoln, Nebraska, where I practice, and I work with companies, both large and small, local and global. This is one that I worked with for 20 years already, from 2002 to 2022, on reducing injuries and accidents. If you look at the top bar, they started off with $163,000 worth of direct costs for work comp injuries. Adjusted for medical costs today, that would be close to $400,000. And you can see
2 million from then to now.
Okay, $500,000 now. And so if you go over 20 years, if they didn't do anything, that would be $10 million worth of costs in this 20-year period. So what we did was we applied a lot of the strategies that we deployed at DTSI and actually drove injuries down to near zero for the course of 5 years and running. Okay, so go back to the previous slide. Okay, so from HR, the quote at the bottom says, it takes time, persistence, and strong commitment to your goals to really change your workforce culture, but the benefits are well worthwhile. So cultural change within an organization is possible using parameters that we've already discussed. Does it work on the ground? Yes, it does. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the mind and body holistic approach is to fuse function of mind and body to get the greatest outcome. And so we go to the next slide now. So what now, instead of the Driver Training and Safety Institute, the brick and mortar location is called the Mind, Movement, Mood Wellbeing Centers, or M3+. Along with my work at Carnegie Mellon with Dr. Meyer, we co-authored a book called Peak Performance, Body and Mind, How to Make Your Body Last a Lifetime. And go ahead to the next slide. So now within M3+, which is the brick and mortar location within my office here in Lincoln, Nebraska, we have what's called the resilience rooms, M3+ resilience rooms. This is one of the rooms. This is the medium-sized room. We actually can have a table here for consultation through Zoom on that TV there. You'll see me deploying Resimax and the BOD, which are validated instruments we use to help a person first reduce the thinking patterns of being in this VUCAH world and being preoccupied with their own patterns that they're stuck and not able to become clear thinkers again. So in a case like HAL for DTSI, we have D. This is before M3+ intervention here in this location. This lady was diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, chronic recurring musculoskeletal pain, post-traumatic stress disorder, plus complex PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, ADHD, and anxious distress. So her treatments before were included psychiatric medications and cognitive therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, EMDR, and these were treatments that she did before she was here. D was not unwilling to be engaged. She was unable to be engaged because of things that were within her holding her back. So her transformation began with a question. She asked me, she said, do you know anybody that does yoga for a trauma release? And I said, well, I know a process that might be very helpful for you. So we went through the M3+ intervention, which included some standard intake forms, other assessments that we use online, resonance therapeutic instruments, such as the BOD and Resimax, evoke somatic coaching, which involves the coaching that using the Mind Evoke cards. And we did this for a period of 4 weeks. Okay, the 30-day outcome was there were profound changes in relief from her IBS, chronic musculoskeletal pain, and the other that were diagnosed conditions that if you're an HR within a company, you know that each of these conditions has costs associated with it and ongoing considerations regarding what is the cost of treatment and what are the likely outcomes.
And we also used, I'm sorry to indicate, we also use evoke somatic movement, which is a movement which is in fact a somatic awareness movement where there is movement at the same time that we are using the card.
Right. And so the real life response from her was M's mindful choice was the first method to teach me how I can reconnect to my body and confidently soothe my body during times of distress. I began to have experiences that many people think of as standard, but she didn't consider it as standard because it wasn't in her. Going down, she said I could feel pleasant sensations and enjoy them. Most of my therapy journey at that point was head knowledge. She was able to, through the resonance therapeutics, the movement patterns, evoke somatic movement that were done in-house in my office, zoomed in from external sources. And this, at the final, she says, this is a new sensation where mind and body are cooperating instead of being at war with one another.
And
Yes.
her testimonial will be online with this session. So
Yeah.
you will be able to see also the testimonial. But in 1 month, you see the before and after. She tried everything and she tried our cocktail. On 1 month, we got result.
Right.
Because we are looking at making her to function. We are not looking at the problem. We are looking at the solution.
And she is
Okay,
delighted.
I'm sorry, but
Nope.
you still have time to speak. I think there will be very, very, very little time for question answer. But Salome, please tell us about you.
Hello, I'm Salome Dumbadze from Georgia, not the state, but the country at the intersection of Eastern Europe and West Asia. I am organizational psychologist and I'm currently pursuing PhD in positive psychology. I'm also a researcher and educator at the School of Social Sciences of Georgian Institute of Public Affairs, also known as GPA. And today I will talk about our collaborative resilience and VUCAH research. Please go back to the slide. And also we'll address some of the practical implications to social emotional learning for building resilience. I will start with introduction of Georgian Institute of Public Affairs that currently collaborates with JIRA, surprisingly having very similar acronyms, and it's located in Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. It was founded in 1984, and since then it has stood as one of the first innovative Western-oriented projects. So our School of Social Sciences started working since 2011, and based on our geographical, social, economic, and political context, it's especially vulnerable to impact of VUCAH World. So our research is both important for our local community as well as for international communities. Now, please go to the next slide, and I will introduce you to Reswell, where with help of GPA, we got into the area of resilience research. And so Reswell is short for Multinational Resilience and Wellbeing Research Collaboration. It's based at Tel Aviv University and is a leading research center specializing in resilience research across 20 countries with 50 researchers that include our institution as one of the members. So Reswell was actively researching resilience prior and during COVID-19 outbreak, as well as during the war in Ukraine. And GPA has collaborated with it since 2020. So through funding of GIZ, we had the chance to participate in most of the researches during COVID, during Ukrainian war. And so our students were making major contributions in the research too. So last semester, we had the chance to extend the Reswell collaboration to VUCAH Reswell initiative, with international group of 30 researchers and field experts that are led by Professor Mayer. And as you can see, based on our logo, and I will mention it again because many viewers might forget the meaning of VUCAH, it stands for short for volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and hyperconnected. And the term is used to describe the current state of the world that negatively impacts our wellness, even beyond our awareness. So our VUCAH group includes the research of impact of media, language of resilience, and creation of valid tools to measure each component of VUCAH. So the goal of our research is to go beyond theory and find the best practices for application of our results to innovative technology and educational and training programs. So as for our School of Social Sciences of GPA, with our Georgian subgroup that is being led by Professor Manana Gabashvili, we are focused on the topic of research of language of resilience. So our master's degree candidates are currently working on the thesis in relation to that. So next slide, please. So during research with Reswell, we investigated resilience indicators, positive coping indicators, as well as negative coping indicators. And what we have found was very important for our local community, especially in the case of internally displaced community, as well as for the local one, was that we were especially impacted by Russia-Ukrainian war, including the informational war that was going on then, as it was presented by media. So in comparison with six other countries that were involved, our data showed that in Georgia, we had the lowest community resilience. We had highest anxiety and depression symptoms right after Ukraine. And also we had PTSD symptoms, second to Ukraine, but being the top of the remaining 5 countries. So perceived threats were the highest in our sample, even in comparison to Ukraine. Also, the empathy towards refugees was the highest in Georgia. And this shows how the media, how the situation around us might impact our mental health. And these findings are very important because they show how important social emotional education might be in our local community, both for internally displaced populations or local populations. Even though our sample was smaller and we had many limitations, still we can see certain tendencies that might not be representative of the whole country, but still we see how big is the problem of the VUCAH world today. And now when we are more aware of VUCAH and its importance to resilience, instead of focusing on the problems, our group wants to focus on solutions, which lies in education and training. So next slide, please. As you already know, Professor Abraham Gerard Meyer, along with Dr. Lebowitz and Professor Leisman, founded the Mental Wellness Society International. And prior to that, Dr. Meyer and Dr. Lebowitz created Mindful Choice System for therapy and coaching, as well as Evoke Psychology Skill Icons. And so these are the visual icon cards. Please go to the next slide. These are the visual icon cards, and now they are expanded into social emotional learning of resilience for children of different age groups, as well as focusing on adults in building resilience through mindful choice therapy and coaching. And currently we are working on PhD project to extend the social emotional learning program beyond children's age groups and concentrate on application of program to our local bachelor degree students, as the use of these age groups are building blocks of our future and our societies, and they are unfortunately especially vulnerable to the effects and impact of VUCAH. And next slide, please. As for the solution, our VUCAH group believes that beyond educational programs focused on youth, we need to go beyond that and train corporations, organizations, governmental institutions through science-based trainings and workshops as another important building blocks for development of resilience of our communities and societies. So these are kind of the part of the bigger picture of societal resilience. And so impacts of VUCAH are really big in rapidly ever-changing world. So we already can see that resilience to VUCAH will become as important and even more urgent than reducing pollution and developing sustainable environmental policies as they were before, because VUCAH is silent and dangerous societal cancer that we need to deal with somehow, which is why we believe that our research can be of practical value in having impact on increasing the resilience of our societies and a way to adapt to the changes occurring in our world. So through the science and through the resources available to us, we want to target both individuals and companies, corporations, organizations, institutions through training and education. So thank you so much for your time and for your attention.
Great in a short time, Salome. So question answer, Neville is still with us, or should I, Neville, you are with us? Okay, so question answer, we don't have too much time, but the question is what next? So this is the first introduction meeting to our group, and we will have other seminar which will be more topic by topic, and we will have training. But if you leave here with one thing, it's important to realize that VUCAH is now a name like at the beginning of COVID, and it's on a big world crisis. Every economical system existing, every model, have been destroyed by VUCAH, and we are looking for new system working with economists. You also need to understand that this group, it's not just a group of few individuals, it's a movement. It's a movement worldwide of people who came together and have decided to change the world the quickest we can to help people. And it's a big work, it's a commitment. And we will have the meeting, and we would like you to contact us and to let us know how we can help you. How can we be of service to you? Is there any question? I will take one question and we will close. Any question? Okay, then I want to thank all of you for listening to us. All of you, my friends, to be amazing presenters under pressure. It comes with VUCAH and resilience. And I want to thank all of you and thank you so much. And let's work together to protect the weakest one in the society. Thank you so much. Oh, Manana was here. Jerry was here. Hello, thank you, thank you. Neville, I was asking if you wanted to close.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll happily throw in a few things at the very end. We've taken people on a fairly extensive journey here, and in the way I promoted this is all the corporates know this, but not many are taking action. Now's the opportunity to take action. Let me just give you a little bit of a history lesson. Jerry, you say, Abraham, you said all the business models are broken. Well, actually, all the business structures are broken as well. And it's been demonstrated. When I've had my first entry into the employment world after university, there were really two parts of the business. One was the finance, administration, personnel. It wasn't called HR, it was called personnel and IT. And the other part was the operational part, which was manufacturing, sales and marketing. Advance that 20 years. We have now, health and safety executive, because the laws changed and all of a sudden companies had to have a health and safety director. Advance that another 20 years. We've now got environmental directors, officers, if you like. So we're now up to 2000. The crisis, the financial crisis in 2008 changed things again. So now the CFO is only a CFO. HR is completely different. We have a CHRO officer. We have an IT officer. We have CISOs, etc. As soon as COVID hit, we were also into the age of digitalization, digital transformation. We now have digital transformation officers. We also have AI officers, call it what you like, really, whether it's augmented information or any other term you want to call it. We are now redefining the whole landscape of who's doing what for whom. It makes obvious sense, actually, because as you and I know, Abraham, we've looked at this so many times. At the very core of this is that resilience. A baby can learn to walk, as Professor Jerry Watt-Leisman said, because it's got one focus. I'm going to walk. Doesn't have to think about feeding themselves, changing themselves, taking the diaper out. They got one focus and they learn how to walk. That resilience is built very, very early. We've lost that capability. And now we need to have a resilience officer that can literally put that capability back into all of us. We've got loads of tools, both tangible and intangible, that can make that happen pretty quickly.
Gerard, can I add something?
Of course, Jerry.
Okay, as long as we're all here anyway. I'm going to take something from the world of medicine, practical medicine, which I have nothing to do with anymore. One of the big problems that at least I as a patient have is I go to a cardiologist and he tells me something about my heart. I go to a neurologist and he tells me something about my brain. But I go to a neuro-ophthalmologist when I want to get something done with my eyes and brain together, and no one is looking at the big picture. It's kind of like the 6 blind scientists trying to understand something about an elephant, and none of them know what's going on. One of the problems with any kind of organization, as I see it, is the same thing that we have with understanding the brain. You really can't understand the brain without the immune piece, without the blood piece, without the X-ray piece, and so on and so forth. And when you fractionate, pardon me, but it's kind of the idea that the Catholic Church had when they founded the universities of Europe 1,000+ years ago, which is, we, the church, have the big picture, and we're going to make sure that no one else has it. That's why you create departments. When you do that from a human relations standpoint, or you're fractionating it ad absurdum, which is you can't manage the organization because organizations don't work in a piecemeal way. Neither does the brain, neither do human beings. So you can take my comments and do with it what you want, but it's not going to work.
Thank you so much. And you were speaking about social interaction. On the age of VUCAH,
hyperconnectivity, exactly.
Have a consequence that we are more connected, but we connect less with the people. We are more isolated. We don't know how to communicate. We don't gather together in the same room. We are not anymore gathering. And as a result, the society with the age, with all the technology, we are more isolated, each of us with ourselves, because we end up to only deal with us, and we don't know how to deal with the rest of the world. So that will bring that to that. Okay. It would be wonderful to spend more time with you, but I think we need to go with the program. And trust me, we'll meet again. All of us, we are working together every day, and we will be very happy to work together on any project, any corporation, any organization, any government will be interested to challenge us with. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.